Let me start with a question. Have you ever noticed how some people crumble at the smallest inconvenience, but others stay calm even when their whole world is falling apart? It is not luck. It is not personality. It is not experience. It is a rule ancient Stoics lived and died by. A rule modern people desperately need, but almost none practice. Control what you can. Accept what you can't. Most people hear this, but they never understand it deeply. Not the way you are about to. Because what the Stoics meant was not passive acceptance. Not letting life do whatever it wants. Not sitting back and hoping for the best. They meant something harder. A radical separation of life into two categories. Things that belong to you and things that do not. And they asked one powerful question. Why suffer over what does not belong to you? Most people do not just suffer. They mentally torture themselves every single day over things they cannot change. Someone else's opinion, someone leaving, the past, the future, rejection, failure, weather, childhood, appearance, relationships, whether someone texts back, whether someone respects them, whether life is fair. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own your mind. Everything else is rented." But most people live the opposite way. They give up control of their mind and cling to things outside their power. And that is why they break. Imagine a young man named Elias. He is the kind of person who feels everything deeply. If someone ignores his message, he spirals. If someone criticizes him, he thinks about it for days. If his plans fall apart, he cannot function. He does not realize it, but the world controls him. Everyone has power over his emotions, even strangers. One day, Elias visits an elderly Stoic teacher, a quiet old man living on the edge of a peaceful village. The old man looks at him and says, "Tell me what troubles you." Elias pours everything out. People do not respect him. Life feels unfair. Friends disappoint him. Nothing goes his way. The old man listens calmly. Then he hands Elias a small bowl of water and says, "Hold this steady while I shake the table." Elias tries. The table shakes. Water spills everywhere. He says, "I cannot control this if you shake the table." The old man smiles. Exactly. He gives Elias the bowl again. This time he says, "Keep only your hand steady. Ignore the table." The table shakes again, but Elias breathes slowly, focuses, holds his hand steady. The water barely moves. The old man leans forward and says, "Life will always shake the table. You cannot stop that, but you can steady your hand." Elias goes silent. Something clicks. Epictetus taught, some things are up to us, some things are not. Once you divide your life into these two parts, your suffering becomes clearer and smaller. Let us practice it now. Things not in your control. Other people's behavior. Other people's feelings. Other people's approval. Who loves you? Who leaves you? The past. The future. Death. Aging. Failure. Outcomes. Random events. Time. Weather. Delays. People misunderstanding you. People ignoring you. People not appreciating you. This is where most people pour their emotional energy, and it is wasted. Now, things in your control. Your reactions. Your character. Your discipline. Your effort. Your choices. Your habits. Your attention. Your boundaries. Your words. Your interpretations. Your perspective. Your behavior. Your next step. Your energy. What you choose to focus on. This is where Stoics live. This is why they appear calm even in chaos. Not because they do not feel pain, but because they refuse to waste it. Marcus wrote, "If something is outside your control, it should be outside your mind." People today are emotionally fragile because they try to control everything except themselves. They try to control people, relationships, situations, reputations, how others see them, how others respond, how life unfolds, but they do not control their habits, their thoughts, their reactions, their discipline, their choices. So they become victims of the world. Everything affects them. Everything moves them. Everything can break them. Seneca said, "What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things." You are not breaking because life is hard. You are breaking because you expected life to be easy. The first shift. Let me remind you of something important before we continue. The rule we're exploring is simple. You cannot control what happens. You can only control how you interpret it. But this rule becomes powerful only when you practice it in real life. Not in theory, not in a peaceful room, but in the chaos of life. So let's go deeper. Imagine this. You are walking down a street. Someone bumps into you hard. They don't apologize. They don't even look at you. Immediately, your mind creates meaning. He disrespected me. He thinks I'm weak. People are so rude. Notice something? It wasn't the bump that hurt. It was the story you created about it. That story is the source of pain, not the event. This is exactly what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But here's the problem. Most people don't realize they are creating stories every minute. They think their reactions are automatic. They think anger is a reaction. They think sadness is a reaction. They think fear is just something that happens to them. But the truth is deeper. Your emotions are not reactions. They are interpretations. And once you understand that, you become unstoppable. Let me show you with a real-world story. There's a man named John. He works in a company where his boss constantly criticizes him. Not because John is doing a bad job, but because the boss is stressed, overworked, and projecting his own insecurities. Before discovering Stoicism, John used to get angry. He would go home irritated, complaining to his wife, losing sleep, feeling like he was being attacked. But one day, he read a line from Epictetus that shocked him. If someone provokes you, remember, it is your judgment that provokes you. John realized something. His boss had no power over his emotions, unless he gave him that power. So the next time his boss spoke harshly, John paused. He reminded himself, this is a stressed man speaking, not an enemy, not a personal attack, just a human projecting his own internal battle. And suddenly, the anger disappeared, not because the boss changed, but because the meaning changed. This is emotional invincibility, not the absence of emotion, but the power to choose the meaning behind your emotion. Let's go deeper. Have you ever heard someone say, "He made me angry," or "She made me feel worthless," or "This situation ruined my day"? That's the language of someone who has surrendered control of their inner world. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Nothing can ruin your day unless you allow it to enter your mind. No one can make you angry unless you give them permission. Let me show you another example. There was a famous Roman story about a slave named Zeno. The same Zeno who later became the founder of Stoicism, before becoming a philosopher. He was in a shipwreck. He lost all his wealth. Everything he owned was gone. Most people would break. They would fall into despair, cry, blame the world, blame fate, blame God. But Zeno simply said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." Think about that for a moment. He lost everything and still saw it as a blessing. Why? Because he understood something most people never see. The event itself is neutral. You give it its meaning. You choose whether it is a tragedy or a transformation. Zeno chose transformation, and that decision, that meaning, made him emotionally unbreakable. Let's bring it back to you. Think about the last situation that stressed you. Maybe someone ignored your message, and your mind immediately whispered, "They do not value me." Maybe someone looked at you strangely, and you thought, "They're judging me." Maybe a plan failed, and you thought, "Life is unfair to me." But what if the real problem was not the event, but the interpretation? What if the girl who ignored your message was just busy? What if the person who looked at you strangely was lost in thought? What if the failed plan was God redirecting you to something better? You see, once you learn to question your first reaction, you unlock a new level of inner freedom. This is the Stoic rule. Interpretation creates emotion. Change the interpretation, and you transform the emotion. Let me ask you something. Imagine someone insults you. What hurts more, the words, or the meaning you attach to the words? If someone calls you stupid, but you know you are intelligent, you will probably laugh. If someone calls you weak, but you know your strength, you will not be moved. But if someone insults you in a way that touches an insecurity, you explode, not because of the insult, but because the meaning was already inside you. This is why the Stoics always said, the real battle. Most people spend their entire lives trying to change the world around them, when the real power was always inside them, in the meaning they attach to events, in the story they choose to tell themselves, in the interpretation they create without even noticing. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people never question their first reaction. They accept it as reality. If someone ignores them, they immediately think, I'm not important. If someone leaves their life, they assume, I was not enough. If something goes wrong, they tell themselves, life hates me. And the problem is not the event. The problem is the meaning they believed without thinking. Stoicism teaches you to interrupt that automatic story, to pause, to stand between the event and your reaction, and ask a simple but powerful question. What else could this mean? And that one question can save your life. Let me give you a real-world example that you can feel. There was a man named Yusuf, a hard-working father, who came home one day and found out his company was laying off workers. His name was on a list. He panicked. He felt like a failure. He sat in his car and cried, thinking his life was over, thinking he had let down his family, thinking God had abandoned him. But 3 months later, that same job he lost was the reason he started a small delivery business. 1 motorbike, then 2, then 10. Today he employs people and says the day he lost his job was the day his real life began. The event did not change. The meaning did. You see, life is not what happens to you. Life is the meaning you attach to what happens to you. Marcus Aurelius understood this so deeply that he wrote, your mind will take the shape of what you frequently think. Meaning, if you constantly interpret events negatively, your life will feel negative, even if nothing terrible is happening. If you constantly interpret events as attacks, you will feel attacked, even when no one is coming for you. If you constantly interpret events as opportunities, you will start seeing pathways, even where others only see problems. Let's go deeper. Think about someone cutting you off in traffic. One person will scream, get angry, horn, insult, raise their blood pressure, and ruin the rest of their day. Another person will simply breathe and tell themselves, maybe this person is rushing to the hospital. Maybe they made an honest mistake. Maybe they did not even see me. One event, 2 meanings, 2 completely different emotional realities. This is why Stoicism is powerful. It gives you back your inner control in a world that constantly tries to steal it. Let me ask you something personal. How many times in your life have you suffered because of your imagination? How many nights have you stayed awake thinking about something that never even happened? How many times did your mind create a worst-case scenario? And you believed it, and it drained your energy, your joy, your peace? That is the power of interpretation. When you do not control it, it controls you. There is a famous Stoic practice for this, one that very few people know, and even fewer actually use. It is called the pause of power. The moment something happens, you pause, before interpreting it, before reacting, before attaching meaning, before letting your emotions take over. Just a few seconds of awareness. And you ask yourself, is my mind creating a story? Or is this the truth? And in that pause,